everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Miah and I'm really happy that you are here. Typically on my channel I focus on eco-travel adventures, mindful fashion, and pretty much my sustainable lifestyle journey with a couple of vlogs here and there. But today I figured that I would share my experience at Tilburg University, and if you have any questions, don't be shy, you can definitely just leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. First up, we have the whole admission process. Honestly, you are probably familiar with StudyLink at this point, and if you're not, definitely go look that up because it's one of the #1 tools that you will need to start your journey here in the Netherlands as an international student. Or as a student in general, to be fair. It was a lot easier for me to actually just go to Tilburg because I was already in the Netherlands. I don't have the same struggles with acceptance and visiting the country like some other internationals I know did, especially if you are from South Africa. I think it's a lot more difficult to find accommodation here if you are not European or American, but we'll get into that a little bit later. All I did was go to the website, see which programs I wanted to do. I kind of weighed my options and explored the different studies, oftentimes looking at the success rate for what kind of jobs I could get after I finished graduation. At the end, I ended up studying online culture, majoring in digital media and global communication. The year that I enrolled in that course was 2016, and the year then was when Trump became president. There was a lot of political issues related to Trump, stuff happening in the US, some stuff happening in the EU. We did a lot of social investigation, looking at what kind of trends were happening across social media platforms, what was happening in news outlets, weighing different options, having debates in classes. So overall it was very interesting, but the study for me was very, very broad. I wish that I had some sort of guidance in how to make it a bit more specific. A lot of the information that I got out of the courses that I was attending actually happened outside of the curriculum, outside of the school curriculum, because I enrolled in certain internships or did a lot of online research and online classes myself, which is a bit excessive, I would say, considering that as an international student you are paying so much to actually study at a university. Obviously tuition fees will vary depending on where you are from. So if you are not European, they are typically higher. For example, for me, tuition fees during my bachelor's program were 5,100 euros a year, and in my master's program I was paying 14,600 euros a year. I was in a really fortunate position where I don't have any student debt, in the sense that my family was able to just pay the tuition fees. However, I know that this is not always a reality for many students, and there are definitely some funding options available, but I think that they are very limited if you don't have any ties to the European Union, in the sense that you might not be a European citizen or have, if you're not a European citizen. But I know that Duo is a very big one and some people are eligible for it. I think you have to check the requirements. I will link some resources in the description bar below just so that you can check that out if you do need assistance with study financing. But the admission process within itself is relatively smooth once you apply, and you kind of go back and forth with documents. So you might have to upload things like your passport, they'll ask for a graduation certificate, anything else that you might need, such as motivational letter. There are so many different documents that they could ask for, and I think that this can range depending on the country where you're coming from. So for me personally, I know I had to upload a motivational letter, my passport, my graduation diploma. I also had to share any extracurricular activities that I was doing. So a couple of weeks before I got accepted to the university, my mom and I actually drove to Tilburg just to scope it out. I do know that they offer some virtual tours over on YouTube and also on Tilburg University's Instagram, but of course some things might have changed, like a couple of buildings no longer exist. So definitely keep up to date with some of the things that they're posting on social media, just so that it's not a complete surprise when you arrive and you have things memorized as to where to go and they no longer exist. In a nutshell though, the admission process is relatively simple, and I think that there are a lot of people that are willing to help. Tilburg University also offers some volunteers that can help you out with setting up a Dutch bank account, also your BSN, which is kind of like your citizen service number. So you'll honestly have a lot of help from other people, and if you're stressed about coming here by yourself, because I know that a lot of people might find that really daunting, don't worry, because you can organize for people to collect you at the airport and kind of show you around and just set some of the things up for you like I previously mentioned. During this time, you will also find it like easier to make friends, I guess, because there will be a bunch of other people coming from their own countries. So it's really easy to connect with people, and you can also like potentially have a WhatsApp group with some of the people who are volunteering. Typically, I know that they are often from ISN. The volunteers that are helping out often also use WhatsApp as a medium to kind of communicate with one another, as well as the people that they are helping out with. So definitely make sure that you have the app downloaded before you come to the Netherlands, so it'll just be easier as it's one of the main ways that people communicate here. Having ISN assist you is also really great because they seem to be very helpful and plan activities and show you around the city as well. So that's really, really great, especially if it's your first time in the Netherlands. Something that I definitely think is important for any prospective student at the university is to make sure that you have accommodation before you are in the country. Too many students arrive here thinking that they'll find an apartment or that they'll find a studio. It's just unrealistic, if I'm completely honest. Again, I was in a very, very fortunate position because I was actually in the country and I was scoping out accommodation. But even when I was in the country, it was taking me 3 to 6 months to actually find a proper accommodation. I crashed at so many random people's houses during my first year before I actually found an apartment. The university does provide links, but in my opinion they aren't doing enough. I literally helped other students find a place to stay. I hosted other internationals in my own bedroom because the accommodation was so bad. Like, there is not really that many places for internationals to stay, and you'll often see, especially on Facebook groups, that a lot of the adverts for vacancies for rooms, studios, or different apartments often say that they only want Dutch students. Obviously make sure that you're comfortable with the people that you're living with and kind of scope out the neighborhood just to make sure for general safety reasons, and also to make sure that it's like relatively close to the university, because you don't want to be tired from biking every single day, because that's also one of the other factors. Once you move here, you will definitely have to cycle. If you don't know how to cycle, you will learn because you have to. That's the main way that people get around here, unless they're using the bus or taking the train somewhere. Of course, obviously, if you're fortunate enough to have a car, that's also an option, but for the most part, students just pretty much use their bikes. So my number one tip for accommodation is to take your time with it. It feels like a lot of pressure to find a place to stay when you feel like you might be homeless, but really take your time with this, because you don't want to end up paying 900 euros, 600 euros, like whatever the amount is, for a place to stay, and then it turns out to be a scam. Ask to view the contract for sure, and also look at the contract carefully for any clauses that state that you might be held liable for property damages if it's not something that you damaged. Because personally, I've had experiences with landlords where something in the house was broken, but they wouldn't come and fix it, and I would have to pay out of pocket. Obviously, having come from like a proper house in Rotterdam to living in a student accommodation, it's a very different ballgame. Landlords don't really seem to care about student accommodation that much. Sometimes they'll send over people to fix things if something like doesn't work or whatever, but for the most part, they're not really interested in whatever is going on at the student house. So if something's broken, yeah, you could wait a couple of days before it actually gets fixed, sometimes even weeks. While I've already touched on fees for tuition, the fees for housing can really range. For example, I've stayed in many different accommodations. So one of the apartments that I stayed in was 760 euros a month, and I stayed there with one other person. It was a really nice apartment, but the neighborhood wasn't so great, and it took us about 20 minutes to cycle to the university each day. And a 20-minute cycle is actually not that bad, but the accommodation, or rather the neighborhood, wasn't that great, like I just mentioned. And then another place where I stayed was like 8 minutes away from the university by bike. It is an area called Nationality, which is where a lot of Tilburg University students stay. The rent there for me ranged from, I think it was 275 to 300. So in Nationality, in my apartment, or the apartment that I lived in, we didn't have a communal space. So that's something that you can also expect, or like kind of anticipate if you're moving here. Sometimes accommodations will not have communal space unless you're lucky, and they probably will have like a living room or a dining room where you can hang out and get to know your roommate. Other times you have accommodation like Talent Square, where you can have a studio or live in a room and also have communal space. And sometimes Talent Square has a lot of different like parties going on, so you can get to know other people there as well. There's also another place that I would recommend, and that's called I forgot what it's called. It's like Verbs. It's just known as Verbs. I forgot the actual name of the street, but I know it as Verbs, and basically it's accommodation where you stay, I think it's with up to 17 people in like one floor, and you guys have like a communal kitchen or like living room area. So from the parties that I've attended at Burbs, I think it's a really nice place to stay, but I actually don't have any experience with living there. Now, if there's a very big shortage with housing and accommodation and stuff, you will find that your options are limited to hostels, hotels, or even Airbnbs. So make sure that you do your research about accommodation before coming here, because if you are an international student, you are already paying so much, and you're going to be paying more if you don't have accommodation, because Airbnbs, hotels and hostels can add up really quickly. So definitely do some research on finding accommodation, and ask the university, like literally pester them to help you with accommodation before you arrive, and then continue the process afterwards. I'm literally holding like a little prayer circle for anyone that's about to go through that, because I've been there and it's not a very pleasant time. So I'm wishing you luck if you're currently in that process. Okay, so the next topic is the actual campus. I personally really loved the campus at Tilburg University. I think it's beautiful. There's a lot of ways to spend some time on campus. Typically, students go to the library where they study, and the library has different sections. So you can book a room and you can choose to study there alone or with a friend, or even if you're busy with a group project, and that's really nice. Or you can have like a silent study session where you don't hear, well, like there's like no noise obviously because it's a silent study session. And then you just have like the computer area, so you can do some work on there as well, and that's pretty cool. Other buildings on campus that I enjoyed studying in was the M building, and that's typically for like law students, but honestly I feel like the entire Tilburg University uses M building to study in because it's so nice and so spacious as well. Something else that I want to add is sometimes that there are so many students that there might not even be enough chairs in the classrooms to accommodate everyone. So if there's a very big class, you'll often get like a massive lecture hall. Definitely I would recommend being a little bit earlier for your classes. Like don't be that one kid that shows up late and like disrupts everyone, because that's one of the other things at the university. Like the desks, they're all together, so if you need to get past someone, like the whole row needs to stand up so that you can like go to your seat. So that's something that I personally didn't like about the classes, but I mean, it's just like a tiny detail. I was also early for numerous reasons, partially because I'm really anxious, so I never wanted to be late for anything, but also because I knew that there was sometimes a lack of seating. Like sometimes you would have students sitting on like the radiators or the windowsills or even the floor because there wasn't like enough seats to accommodate everyone. But this was not a very common occurrence. Like for most of my classes, everyone had a space to properly sit, so it's not like a big deal. But keep in mind that sometimes if the classes are very popular, this will tend to happen. Student life on campus in itself is very interesting as well. I find that a lot of Dutch students stick together, and a lot of internationals form their own groups. I'm not really sure why that is. Personally, I have a mixture of Dutch friends and also international friends, but I think it might just be easier for Dutch people to speak their own language and for internationals to group together because they share a similar experience as to why they came here, so they have something to kind of like relate to each other about. I've also noticed that in terms of hanging out, there are very different activities that internationals like to do compared to Dutch people. For example, internationals typically like to do day trips, they like to go somewhere, they like to cook together. While a lot of Dutch people like to do this too, many times the activities will revolve around going out or going for a drink. There are a ton of different ways to get to know people though, and these mainly consist of study and student associations, which you have to join, or not have to, but it's definitely beneficial to get to know more people through these associations. So with study associations, for example, they typically relate to what you study and are set up by a group of people from your faculty, and you might go on like study trips. So the study association that I was part of is called Animo. Basically they did a bunch of different activities, so you would have drinks with everyone that's in the team. You could go to different like cafes, do pub crawls. We also went abroad twice. Well, I went abroad twice with them. They would go abroad every year, I believe. I went with them to Ireland and I went with them to Sweden, and we learned a whole bunch of different things related to our study, as well as just get to actually explore the cities that we were staying in, which was also really nice. A good way to get to know a lot of different people from different studies and also like from different backgrounds is to join one of the 4 associations on campus. So first up you have ISN, which is the International Exchange Student Network. Basically ISN's main goal is to help international students feel at home, so they have a bunch of different events that you can go to. While a majority of them do consist of parties, they also have day trips that you can participate in. The other 3 associations consist of Olof, Plato, and BIDAR. BIDAR is probably, I think, one of the coolest associations that I've ever come across. Because they're association for rowing. So basically you have people who just kind of compete in rowing matches rowing matches. I hope that's the correct term, but I don't know. I think it's really interesting. And also all of the associations have their own like sorority house, like fraternity house, or like I guess you could just say association house all over Tilburg. So with VDAR, it's a sporting association of the four. It consists of rowing teams, so basically you train together and you can hang out with other members from the team. I think it's a pretty cool concept, and also VDAR's house is insane, so that is pretty cool. If you're interested in getting fit and also getting to know more people, definitely check them out. The other two associations consist of Olof and Plato. I know that Olof is the more traditional one out of all four. I think they're probably the most Dutch one as well, so if you can speak Dutch or are looking to integrate into something that's a bit more traditional and maybe even a bit more conservative, they're right up your alley. I don't actually know what Plato does. However, Plato is the youngest association and also the largest one in Tilburg, so that's pretty cool, I guess. I also know that they have a bunch of different committees, as other associations do, but Plato's values revolve around equality and diversity, so that's pretty cool as well. But yeah, definitely take your time to kind of figure out which association is best for you. There is an introduction to all of these associations in an event known as Top Week, which is something that all students will join during their first week at Tilburg University. I guess it would be similar to Rush Week in the States. So you basically scope things out, you go around to different associations, what would be fraternities, sororities, and then you check out like what they have to offer, except they don't choose you, like you choose them. You sign up to become part of their association. It's not like they'll say no compared to the States, for example. So another thing about Top Week is that it's quite organized, so everyone gets a little schedule, and from my experience, at least we all had to meet like in the gym, and you get 2 team leaders, and these are your top daddies or your top mommies for the week. That's basically what they're called. That's not just me like throwing these random words around. But yeah, so I had 2 top mommies and they were the best. They made my experience so great coming to the university. We did a bunch of pub crawls. We had like outdoor sports events. It's a really good bonding activity, getting to know people. We also had a pool day, a cinema day, and again, a lot of parties in the evening. So it's a really great way to get to know people from your study. And it's a great way to get to know different locations in Tilburg itself. Speaking about the city though, I have to say that there's not as much to do as I had expected. But to be fair, I didn't even know that Tilburg actually existed when I was living in Rotterdam. It's not that there's nothing to do, and it's not that Tilburg is a boring city. It's just a very small city compared to cities that I've previously lived in. There are quite a few activities that you can do. For example, you can go bowling, there's karaoke, there's paintballing. What else is there? There's a little safari park that's close by as well. So those are some activities that you can do in Tilburg. In the main city center, however, it's mainly reserved for shopping and for restaurants. But yeah, for most students, I would say like fast food options are quick and easy to go to. There's also the cinema, and if you go on a certain day of the week, it's a little bit cheaper as well. Tilburg's nightlife is pretty fun as well. There are a bunch of different clubs and bars that you can visit. Personally, my favorite club was always Studio because they had a really good mix of music. Some of the most popular choices are Café Philip, Café Bola, Studio, and there's one other, oh, De Buccaneer. I think I said that correctly. I probably butchered it. That's also one of the options. I know that those are very popular among students. Obviously, like most people, I have some criticisms about the university that I attended in terms of things that I think could have been done better, but overall my experience was really positive. If you have any questions about my experience or some of the programs, definitely feel free to message me and I'll see where I can help out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative, and have a great day, and see you guys in my next one. Goodbye.